Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. Well, we're back after the Thanksgiving holiday here in the US, and I, for one, ate way too much food. But we're back, and we've got a good topic for you today. Here it is: scheduling FTP file transfers to and from a Horner OCS. Now, as application engineers and control engineers, our primary job is to make sure our machinery or our equipment or our applications and processes are running properly and automated properly. But these days, with the industrial Internet of Things and cloud data and machine data, we're being asked more and more to provide real-time data as well as historical data to our customers and their management from our machinery. So if we're talking real-time data, that's not a big deal. We can just use industrial Ethernet protocols like Modbus TCP and Ethernet IP, and we've talked about those a lot on this channel. But if we're talking historical data, maybe some spreadsheet data from some data logs of our process parameters, maybe some automatically generated production reports, well, that's file data, and file data requires a different protocol. And if you are a customer using Horner OCS to control your machine and you need file data out of your equipment, more than likely you're considering FTP. So that's why we're covering this topic today. All right, let's take a look at how we're breaking down the topic. We're going to start off with what is FTP and when would you use it. We'll talk about setting up FTP on the OCS. Now, after you set up the OCS, you're still going to need an FTP client app on your computer to actually transfer the files. We're going to introduce you to EnvisionFX software, which is a software utility from Horner that can be really useful for automating and scheduling file transfers from your machinery, based on OCS of course, to a computer. And of course, there's going to be plenty of demonstrations throughout. All right, let's get started. So what is FTP? Well, most of you already know FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It's an Ethernet-based protocol used for transferring files between computers, from computer to machine, and vice versa. Now, from an Ethernet port standpoint, it uses ports 20 and 21, and it's supported by all Horner OCS All-in-one Controllers with a built-in Ethernet port. And these days, that's just about everything we sell, except for the X2 entry-level micro OCS. Every other product either comes with Ethernet standard, or in the case of XLE and XLT, it's an option at no additional cost. Now, when would you use FTP? Well, anytime your machine controlled by an OCS is connected to a local Ethernet network, and there's a computer somewhere on the network, and they want to either read or write files from the OCS itself to that computer, that's a scenario where you are going to want to use FTP. Now, what are some of the files that we would want to transfer? Well, in the opening, I talked about data log files and report files, but there's a couple other to consider as well. Maybe your goal is to write a new application file from a computer somewhere in the facility to the OCS, and then someone's going to basically upgrade the OCS application from that file. So that's a PGM file. That could be one that you might want to transfer. What about a screen capture? Maybe under certain alarm conditions, you do a screen capture in your logic on the OCS to capture some trend data or something. And that graphic file could be later transferred over FTP as well. So there's lots of different files that you might want to transfer. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different this week. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a review of a demo that I have going on the bench. Now, we haven't talked really about implementing FTP yet. We've just talked about it in general terms. But I'm going to show you kind of the machine example that I've simulated for you that later on we're going to use FTP to do some file transfers. All right, so let's head to the bench. And let's take a look at our setup here. So what I've done is I've simulated a machine that effectively produces batches of material. And you have the ability to select the material that you want and the quantity that you want, and to effectively execute a batch from the front. Now, after it finishes with manufacturing this batch of material, it's going to use the Cscape report editor to automatically generate a production ticket that gets logged to the memory card that is a record of what happened with this particular batch. And then that's the file, along with a optional production report that gets printed once per day, that we're going to be handling from an FTP standpoint. Now let's take a look at some of the file handling I've done on the OCS itself. This has nothing to do with FTP, it just factors into our overall workflow. Okay, so we've had a production ticket based on the batch we just produced, so that's ready here. And then that, as well as a production report, okay, those files are given generic type names and they end up in this print folder on the memory card. Now that's just my application programming, nothing special about the print folder, it's just what I named it. And that's where the last production report and the last production ticket get printed. Okay, so that's how I've set up the application. Now, immediately after those are printed, in my application, I archive those files, and I've set up a structure of folders here. And whether it's a report or a ticket, I give it a new name, okay, and that new name is based on the date and the time. And then if we scroll down to the bottom here, we'll probably see the report that we just printed at the bottom of the list. I've printed a lot of reports, as you can see. There's the one that just was printed at 2:05 p.m. here Eastern Time, and that's located in the archive folder. Now, the whole purpose of that is just to have a safe place for that file to reside effectively forever. But at the same time I made a copy of the file and renamed it, I also made another copy and put it in a send folder. So a send folder is where I've earmarked a location for the remote FTP client on the computer to come copy files, and then when it's done copying the files, to go ahead and delete them, because the original copy of the file has been archived elsewhere on the memory card. So that's the workflow that I've set up here on this particular OCS. And we're going to use FTP to grab files out of that send folder, and then we're going to delete them once we're done uploading them. Okay, let's go back and take a quick look at a little bit of the setup details in Cscape. Now, I used the report editor in this application. I also used removable media function blocks in this particular application. And we've posted, Marcy was kind enough to post the links to those videos in the comment section so that if you're interested in all the final details, you can watch those videos as well. But I'm just going to quickly review what I did to generate these files, and then we'll move on to FTP. So in the program report editor section, this is where I created the report, the production report, and the ticket. And this happens to be the ticket that I generate after every batch. I'll go here under File and Configure Printer, and we can say there's the generic file name for that ticket, and it gets copied, sure enough, into that print folder. And then from there, we're going to use logic, removable media function blocks, to actually make copies of that file and archive them away. So here's the removable media function block here that takes that generic ticket right after it's been printed, renames it, and archives it based on the day and the month and the hour and the minute. And then we make another copy a little further down here, and that goes into the send folder. So that's effectively how I've set up this application, the workflow I've set up the application. Still nothing directly to do with FTP, but this send folder is where we've earmarked the files to be uploaded from based on my workflow. Okay, let's head back to our material and continue on FTP. So how do we set up FTP on the OCS? It could not be simpler. First of all, we have to make sure our Ethernet port is fully configured. For most applications, that means at least the IP address and the net mask. If you're going to be doing FTP remotely, then you're also going to have a gateway involved as well. But once you've set up Ethernet like you normally would, the next step is to go to the resident protocols there in the Ethernet configuration and make sure that FTP is selected. And then once you've highlighted that and pressed the Configure Selected Protocol button, then you just need to add in the login credentials, and you can add up to 2. And what I typically do is I'll add a read-only login credential and a read-write login credential. That gives the most flexibility. And generally, since most of the transfers are done from a machine or from a computer, 2 sets of credentials is plenty. So that's really all that's required on the OCS side of things to set up FTP. After you've set up the OCS to support FTP, you still need a piece of software on your computer to actually do the transfer, and that's called an FTP client. And there's a variety of good ones on the market. A lot of them are open source and are free, including the one that I tend to use the most, and that is called FileZilla, from the same folks that give you Firefox, that browser. FileZilla is a nice FTP client that's available. Now, they also have a pro version for a whopping $20 cost that allows you to do some automation and do some automatic background type file transfers and things. Another very popular one is another free one called WinSCP, and there's a whole bunch of other ones as well, and I've just mentioned a couple on the screen there. Let me talk about EnvisionFX. EnvisionFX is a Windows FTP client from Horner Automation. Now, it's really been designed not as a general purpose FTP client, but as a FTP client specifically geared around communicating with an OCS. But it has some things going for it. First of all, it supports scripting and scheduling for automated file transfers. That can be very handy, and we're going to show you how to do that later. Also, it comes with Horner support. When you buy this piece of software, you're not having just to search the internet to try and find support. You can actually talk to a human being that can help you if you run into an issue. So that's a couple really big advantages there. And then finally, something that used to be a bigger deal, but now not as much, is the fact that you don't actually even have to have a Horner product with an Ethernet port to be able to exchange files with EnvisionFX. That's because as long as you can communicate with the Horner product, whether that's over USB or CAN or Ethernet, of course, any way you can communicate with it, you can also exchange files. So that is a nice little bonus there. Let's do a quick demonstration of setting up FTP on the OCS and using an FTP client. So let's head back to our computer. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize Seascape. And I'm going to start by, actually, I'm going to go right back into Seascape. How about that? I'm going to start by going into the hardware configuration. And I'm working with an XL4, so I'm going to go to the configuration on LAN 1. There's only one Ethernet port on an XL4. I'm going to make sure my Ethernet port is configured with at least an IP address and a net mask. And then down here under resident protocols, I make sure FTP is selected. And then I highlight it and press configure selected protocol. And there are my two user credentials that I typically type in, at least one that's read-write and another that's read-only. Okay, and now I'm done, except for the download portion, of course, for configuring FTP with the Horner OCS. So very straightforward. Okay, now we'll go ahead and minimize Seascape. And we'll go ahead and fire up an FTP client. We'll start with FileZilla. That's that nice general FTP utility, client utility that is open source and free. Okay, so we need to type in the connection details for our OCS here. Okay, and our login credentials. And for read-write, I'll do admin and 1234, which is what I configured. And I'll just hit quick connect. So on the left here, these are files on my computer. Okay, and on the right here, these are the files on the micro SD card on the XL4 in this case. So I can go right to that print directory and see the last two tickets and production reports that were filed. I can then go to the send folder and take a look at all the files that are sitting there waiting for me to upload. And I can go ahead and do that manually if I want. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and highlight those files, and I'm going to drag them over into another directory, and boom. Obviously, it doesn't take long at all. Those are very small files, of course, but the transfer happens very quickly. So again, using a FTP client is really very, very straightforward. Now let's go ahead and fire up EnvisionFX. And you'll see that on first glance, it's really pretty similar in a lot of ways to a generic FTP client. On the left-hand side here, this is files on my local computer. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my C drive, and I'll go ahead and go to the EnvisionFX folder, and then I've created a files folder beneath that, and that's precisely where the files that I just uploaded using FileZilla have been placed, and you can see that it's there here on the left-hand side. Now I haven't actually got the OCS connected yet, so let's do that now. To do that, I go to the File menu, and then I go to Connect and Connection Wizard. And one thing you will recognize pretty quickly is this connection wizard looks very similar to the one that we use in Cscape. Okay, and my connection method is going to be Ethernet. All the default information is perfectly fine. I can just hit OK here. All right, and then within a couple or 3 seconds, I get the same view of the micro SD card that I had with FileZilla. So I can dive into the Send folder and I can see the files that I've already uploaded. Now, if you remember the workflow I described, I talked about the fact I wanted to upload the files and then delete them. Well, I uploaded using FileZilla, but I didn't delete them. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these files using EnvisionFX here. And I'll just go ahead and get that done. Delete file, yes, and then one more. Now, of course, I'm doing everything manually still. All right, and we're going to talk about automating this process as well. But that's really what's involved when it comes to using both a FTP client as well as EnvisionFX manually when you're connecting to an OCS over FTP. All right, let's continue on now and start talking about how we can automate these file transfers. Now, why would you want to automate a file transfer? Well, certainly, if you have files that are being generated on a regular basis and you want to go ahead and upload those on a regular basis or retrieve those on a regular basis, that's a good reason, right? We've talked about data logs and production reports and those sorts of things. You might want to do that on a daily basis or a weekly basis. You may have some reports that are maybe only on a monthly basis, whatever the case may be, but you want to automate that process. Now, a lot of FTP clients, including FileZilla Pro and WinSCP, have the ability to support scheduled file transfers. Now, I'm not going to go into any details on those tools. What I'm going to do today, however, is I'm going to talk about using EnvisionFX to automate your file transfers. There are 3 key features in EnvisionFX that make it conducive to performing these automated transfers. The first one is scripting, and that's used by EnvisionFX so that you can, ahead of time, through the script that you create, tell EnvisionFX what you want to have happen during the session in which EnvisionFX is connected to the OCS. What files do you want to retrieve? What files do you want to delete, etc., etc. Scheduling is another feature that's added. So you can have a script that basically only executes certain days of the week, only executes certain times of the day, and that's a key feature, of course. And then you can also run things in silent mode so that after you've set it up, all these file transfers just happen in the background and they just automatically occur without any human intervention. If that's what you're looking to do, you can certainly accomplish that, and we're going to show you how. So what's the workflow look like when you're creating an automated file transfer using EnvisionFX? Well, the first step is you need to create that script, which is just a text file that contains the instructions that tells EnvisionFX what you want to have happen automatically. Once you've created your script, you're going to create a Windows shortcut, and that Windows shortcut will do the following things. It will invoke Envision. It will specify your custom script that you've created that needs to be executed. And if everything needs to run in the background in silent mode, then you would specify that as well from the shortcut. Once the shortcut's been created and customized, you're going to run that to trigger the script. And potentially, if it's something you want in the background to happen all the time or to happen automatically and to be loaded automatically, you might want to copy that shortcut into your Windows Startup folder so that every time that computer boots up, it runs the script and it's ready to go. Let's talk about some of the key script commands that you will use in your script, or you might use in your script. And I'm going to illustrate this with my example here in a minute. Okay, we start with open. What does the open command do? Well, it establishes the connection with the OCS. What's the IP address if we're talking over Ethernet? What are the timeouts? Those sorts of things. There's another command called local CD. This is useful on the PC side of things. What local CD does is it tells the PC what directory to change to on the PC side, because you're going to want to switch to a particular directory where your files will be copied into, or maybe where you're going to retrieve the files that you're going to send to an OCS if you're going to send files to the OCS. there's a command called cd up. Now this is used on the OCS side, or at least it's implemented on the OCS side, and what it does is it moves the current directory up one level to the parent directory on the OCS. So in my application, all the files that are going to be retrieved by the FTP client, EnvisionFX in our case, are going to be one directory down from the root directory. So I like to start my script with a cd up to get everything up to the root directory to start. And then there's a cwd command. What's that do? Well, that changes the working directory on the OCS drive. So we'll use that to change to our send directory, for instance, so that EnvisionFX can find the files that it needs to upload. And then when we upload files, we can either use the retr command, which is retrieving a single file from the OCS, or a get command, which we can use to retrieve multiple files. If we retrieve multiple files, we need to use wildcards like star.star and question marks and other things to specify the specific files that we want to get. All right, a few more and then we'll move on to the next part of things. If you want to copy a file automatically from the computer down to the OCS, you use the store command, STOR. There's also a command called RNFR, which is used to rename a file on the OCS side of things. Now, in my particular application, I'm not using that. I did all my renaming and everything through code on the OCS side of things. But there are certainly applications where the computer could decide to handle the renaming of a file. There's a delete command, which I'll use in my example to delete the files after I've uploaded it. And then there's a quit command that closes the connection at the end. There are others as well, but those are really the highlighted, most important, in my opinion at least, script commands. Now let's go ahead and let's do a demonstration. Let's build a script for EnvisionFX. Okay, so let's head back to our computer. And what I'm going to do as I build my script is I'm going to start by opening up the file location that EnvisionFX is loaded in. Now, here's an important note. The default location for EnvisionFX when you install it from the installer is in the Program Files x86 location on your computer. Now, the only problem with that is set as a read-only type directory. And I'm going to want to edit script files and have some other log files and things that show up in that directory. So it's really inconvenient for that to be read-only. So what I've done is I've installed the EnvisionFX folder directly off the root directory of my C drive. So that's just where I've put it here in this case to keep everything read-write. So I've got a script file I've already created. Let's go ahead and review that. So I'm going to go ahead and open that here. And as you can see, it's just a text file that opens in Notepad. Now, the first thing you may notice is the open command. And the first reaction that you will probably have and are having right now is, holy cow, look at that syntax. How am I ever going to get that syntax 100% right on the first try? Well, the good news is that EnvisionFX can generate that syntax for you. And let me show you how. I'm going to go ahead and load once again the application, the EnvisionFX application. And from the help file, I'm going to select a special option called Generate Connection String. And it pulls up my connection details. When I hit OK, after I've got everything the way I want it, when I hit OK, it copies all that connection syntax in the right format to the clipboard. So now after I close EnvisionFX and go back to my script, when I right-click and hit paste, or when I hit Control-V to paste, boom, there is all the syntax perfectly created for my file. So pretty nice. All right, I'll go ahead and delete that old line there. Now, just to note, this first part of this open line here is just a text string. That part really isn't all that critical, but I am truly talking to an XL4 and not an XL7. So after the open command, the next thing I'm doing in my script is I'm changing on my local directory, in other words, the PC directory, I'm changing to the C EnvisionFX files folder where I'm going to be copying my files into when I ultimately copy them to the PC. Next, I'm executing a cd up command. What does that do? Well, on the OCS drive, it makes sure the OCS is up at the top level of the file hierarchy. So that's what the cd up command does. Next, on the OCS side of things, I'm executing a CWD, or change working directory, to the send folder. That's the folder, remember, where I'm placing my files to be uploaded by the FTP client. After switching to that directory, I'm doing a get star.star, which uploads all those files that are in that folder. Then I'm doing a delete star.star, because once I've uploaded them, I want to keep that directory clean. I've got an archived copy elsewhere on the OCS in my application code, so I'm good to go. And then I do the quit command. So that is the script that I've created for my particular application. So you close it, and then you would save the script. Let's go ahead and head back to our material. So once we've created our script, what was the next step of the workflow? Well, the next step of the workflow was to create a shortcut for our EnvisionFX script. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go to the folder that EnvisionFX is contained in. We're going to right-click on the executable file, and we're going to select the Create Shortcut button. Now, if we've installed EnvisionFX in the default directory with the Windows x86, that's going to be a read-only type directory, and we're going to have to copy that newly created shortcut somewhere else, like, for instance, the desktop. But if we've put it in a read-write location like the one that I selected, we won't have that problem. But once we've created this new shortcut, now we need to customize it by right-clicking on it and pressing Properties. Once we go into Properties, then it's all about customizing the target line. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to add the details of our script to the end of the target line. So we're going to add a space. We're going to add the full name of the script file, including .txt. And then if we want to invoke silent mode as well, at the end of our file name, we would put an additional space and then -silent at the very end. Once we're done, we press OK, and we've created our EnvisionFX script shortcut. Now let's go back to the computer, and let's go ahead and finish up this workflow. At least from the standpoint, let's create this shortcut. So I am in the folder containing EnvisionFX. I'm going to right-click on the executable and hit Create Shortcut. It's created this file right here, EnvisionFX Shortcut. Now I'm going to right-click on that and press Properties, and I'm going to customize the target line. Now I need to add the full name of my script file, and I've named it, surprise, surprise, script file. I got to remember to not forget the .txt. And then this is where I would also add space -silent if that's what I was doing. Now, ultimately I will make this a silent mode file, but for now I'm going to delete that for the sake of demonstration purposes and just include the script file only. I'll hit OK, and now I've got a shortcut that's been created that when I double click on it, it's going to execute that script, and I'll be good to go. Now, before I actually do that, to demonstrate it, let's make sure we have a new file that we want to go ahead and upload. So let's head back to the bench. Let's go ahead and print a new production report. Let's go to the send folder and make sure that production report is sitting there ready to be grabbed. It is, and you can see we renamed it to a name that's based on time and date. Now let's go back to our computer. Now let's see what happens when I double click on this shortcut. So I get a window that pops up because I'm not in silent mode, and then it's executing the script and it's giving me feedback in this console. And I can see that everything went well. It retrieved the file with the name that we saw there in our send directory. It executed a delete and it said everything went okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then let's go look in this files folder. Sure enough, it went ahead and added this new file just now. And then let's go back here, go back to the bench, and just verify that the file was deleted from the memory card. So back to the bench, pull up our send folder, and sure enough, that directory is now fully empty. Terrific. Let's go ahead and head back to our material, and let's move on to our next part of our workflow. So we've created a script, we've created a custom shortcut that specifies EnvisionFX and which script for it to run. Now let's go ahead and make this fully automated. What we've done so far would allow a human to double click on a custom developed shortcut. It would allow them to trigger the automatic retrieval of a file, for instance, and they wouldn't have to remember what's the connection details on the OCS, what file do I need to retrieve, where do I put it on my computer. You don't need to remember any of that stuff. They just need to double click on the shortcut and it handles it for them. But it is semi-automatic in that the computer doesn't just automatically do it on a timed basis. So the next part of our workflow is we're going to actually create a timed schedule for the script so that it executes at certain times of the day on certain days of the week. And to do that, we're just going to add to our script some syntax which specifies time and day of the week. And you can see the way it's shown there on the screen. I've got some examples. We've got a script that's going to run at 5:55 a.m. every day of the week. Another one that executes at 23:59 p.m. on Monday through Friday. And then finally one at 3 o'clock p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday only. So you can see the syntax there that you add into your script file to specify the time of day that it needs to execute and which days of the week it needs to execute. So that's how we're going to add that detail to our script. What's going to happen after we add the time and date information and we save that in our script is that when we invoke that EnvisionFX shortcut that's running that script, EnvisionFX will now be running in the background. And then after we test our script, if we really want to make things work properly, we're going to put that shortcut into the Windows Startup folder so that every time our computer boots up, that shortcut will be executed, which is going to execute the script. Now, when we're talking about invoking things automatically and having it run all the time, that's where we're going to want to have things run in silent mode. So one of the things I'm going to show you is how to invoke silent mode. And then I'm also going to show you, of course, how to go ahead and add that shortcut to your Windows Startup folder as well. So let's head back to the computer. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add time of day and day of the week where we want to execute our script. So I'm going to open up the script file again. And in the top line, in my case, I just want to execute this whole thing certain times of the day, certain days of the week. I'll go ahead and make this guy execute, let's say at 14:35, which is about 2 minutes from now. Let's have it execute every day but Sunday and Saturday. So I put a dash for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, a dash for Saturday, another end bracket, and I've added the syntax. I'll now save this file. And this is the script that's already specified in my EnvisionFX shortcut. So now let's go ahead and double click on the shortcut. We're still not in silent mode. And now our script, when I double click on it, it's not actually doing anything yet because it's waiting for 2:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Now this is the exciting portion of a live broadcast. The way you can tell it's a live broadcast because we're sitting here waiting for this script to execute. We're waiting for 2:35 p.m. Eastern Time. So sorry for that, but that's what happens when you watch live presentations like this. So there we go. It's now 2:35 p.m. and our script just executed and everything worked beautifully. Now you'll notice, since we didn't have any files ready to be retrieved, that we did get a message that says no matching file. So we didn't actually upload anything or delete anything, but everything executed just fine. And that's a further illustration that you don't necessarily have to have files sitting there ready to be retrieved in order for this to work. Now let's take last step and let's have this execute in silent mode and then make sure that this script is running all the time. So I'm going to close it down now. And now I'm going to go into my shortcut, right click on the shortcut, hit Properties. My script is already set up to execute at the time and the days of the week that I want. Now I just need to add silent mode to the equation here. So I'm just going to go to the end of the target line, hit a space, dash silent, and hit OK. All right, and we're good to go there. So I've made that change. Our script is still fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. You'll notice it takes a few seconds of execution, but after those seconds are up, nothing happens. Why? Because everything is now running in the background. So nothing is really going to happen until 2:35 p.m. tomorrow Eastern Time, and then it'll attempt to do another transfer based on the way my script file was created. Okay, to make sure this executes all the time and after I shut down this computer, it doesn't stop executing, let's go ahead and add a copy of this shortcut to our Windows Startup folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Start R to pull up the Run window, and then shell:startup. That calls up the Startup folder. Currently, I'm automatically loading Google Chrome on Startup. Let's go ahead and copy the shortcut and paste it into our Startup folder. So now, even after I shut down this computer tonight, when it reboots, it's going to automatically rerun that script, and it's going to be ready to transfer files automatically in the background. Now, how do we know it's actually running in the background right now? Remember, we double-clicked on it before we added it to the folder. The way we can do that is we can hop into the Task Manager, and under Processes, we can see, sure enough, there's our file transfer client located there. If we go to Details, we can see EnvisionFX.executable. That's also running. So everything's running in the background, ready for 2:35 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, so we have created a EnvisionFX script that every day, Monday through Friday at least, at a certain time of day, it executes a sequence that's going to load files from a predetermined directory in my OCS, and then after it has copied them into the location on the computer that we've specified in the script, it deletes those files from the OCS memory card to keep things nice and clean, and then waits around until the next day. So that is doing automated scripting using EnvisionFX for file transfers. Our technical wrap-up is as follows. Using FTP is a convenient way to transfer files to and from the OCS over Ethernet. It's super easy to set up on the OCS side, just a couple of steps. You will need FTP client software of some kind to transfer the files. EnvisionFX is an option if you're using an OCS on a Windows-based PC, of course. And the advantages of EnvisionFX is that you get Horner support, and you have a straightforward mechanism for automating and scheduling file transfers. Now let's talk about the fact that we're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. For those of you who watch live Tuesdays at 2, even if I'm not fully live, even if I'm traveling or something and I pre-recorded the video, we have people standing by to answer your questions from the chat section. Now, if you're watching on replay, like a lot of you do, we still want your comments and your questions. Just put those in the comment section. We reply to those really quickly. Now, I still am not quite sure exactly what the video is going to be next week. That's what I'll be working on after this is over with. But check our website and our December newsletter when it gets distributed, and it'll tell you precisely what our topics will be for all December. But you can be assured every Tuesday at 2 o'clock during December, we will be here with a new live video for you. One last thing before I close out, and that is, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. And now that our YouTube channel includes both Horner automation and Horner lighting content, you'll know you'll have all the best Horner content you can find on one YouTube channel. So that's definitely something you're going to want to subscribe to. So until next week, let's all get out there and let's do us some good.